So tell me, how did you start your career? Because you became a general, and they just don't give those titles out just for showing up.
No,
You
no.
have to earn it. So how did you end up becoming a general?
So I went to WSU and I was a pre-law major with a communications minor and thought I wanted to be a constitutional lawyer,
So what is a constitutional lawyer?
someone who deals with government law.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That was my
That was your focus.
focus and area of
Okay.
interest. And so um, I actually, my junior year was an intern at the state legislature. I was, it was a great program, and they usually didn't, select anybody but seniors. So I went for the interview my junior year because I thought that would be a good learning experience for my senior year when they usually, but I got accepted as a junior. So off I went to the state legislature as a junior. And it was a great experience. It was when you're from one of the big schools at that time, WSU and the UW, you got kind of the good assignments. And I was assigned to a guy from the little town I was born in, Prosser, Benton County seat, over in the Yakima Valley. And
Oh, really? So you're from Prosser? Mm-hmm. Really? That's okay. Go ahead. I just think that's fantastic.
so Max Bennett was his name, and he was the head of higher education committee, and he was the head of sat on the transportation committee. Some interesting things that I was interested in anyway. And so I had a really good experience. I became close friends with somebody who was there, with this gal who was she wasn't there as an intern, but they had these programs where you got paid to do it, and her father was the Speaker Pro Tem of the House, so she was there, and we were both juniors, and we got on great, and so I spent a lot of time at the Speaker Pro Tem's house. She went to the University of Washington. I went to WSU. He was a WSU graduate, so he and I got on well, and so that had a lot of advantages. I heard a lot of conversations I probably would not have heard if I hadn't been with that much access to the Speaker Pro Tem of the House. And anyway, I learned a lot, and so that made me, when I went back to school, made me think about, having grown up in college towns all my life, do I really want to go right to law school, or should I go see the world a little bit? So
Good thought. Good question.
So I thought, well, maybe I'll join a service. So, and go that'll get me out in the world. Mm-hmm. So I went to the Air Force, and they said, that'll be 4 years, and you start off as an enlisted rank, and then you after 6 months you go to commissioned officer training. And I said, okay. And then the Navy said, well, that'll be 3 years, same thing. Start off in an enlisted rank, and then you go to officer training after about 6 months. But the Army said, well, we make you a second lieutenant right away, and it's 2 years. I said, this is the one for me. So
That's wonderful.
that's why I joined the Army.
That's incredible. So I know a lot of people who've gone in the military, and they just do their couple of year stint and they leave. And then I've met people that they like it and they stay for 20 years, and then they start another career and they generate like 2 or 3 different retirement plans. What really turned you on to really want to progress? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think I came in the Army just when they were starting to bring women in some large measure. And so turned out I was a Department of Army test case when I was in my first unit. I didn't know that at the time.
Right.
But they were monitoring me to see how I did, because
Yeah, you did, yeah.
they hadn't had many women in basically all male units.
Yes.
So and here I was, a young second lieutenant. But I was thriving, and
So you were enjoying it too.
yeah, I mean, I was in a combat engineering battalion, and I was in a truck company, a big truck company, and it was like about 900 men and me, which was a little shocking for a sorority girl, but you know,
Opportunity.
yeah. But you know, I'd always played tennis and things like that,
You're physical.
so I was playing different sports, and that, and of my counterpart lieutenants. I mean, my soldiers never worried about me because I was always fit. I could always run and do all the things. And so as it turned out, they decided to bring women to the service academies, and the commandant of cadets at West Point was for a dinner in Boston, and I was stationed in Massachusetts at Fort Devens. And the post commander was at the dinner, and the commandant was bemoaning the fact that he needed role models. And so the post commander said, "Well, I have a role model. I have a lieutenant. I have a lieutenant who'd be a good role model, you know." So, 2 days later, I was on a plane to West Point for interviews, and then
Really?
so I ended up going when they had brought the first class of women to the military academy. I was there what I thought was going to be for a summer, and they kept me for 3 years. But I learned a lot.
Was it good schooling?
West Point? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an excellent school.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, excellent. And I was there in the protocol office initially, and then they took me over to the Department of Military Instruction, so where I taught cadets.
Oh, so you taught cadets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
I used to tell people I was in the ROTC department. They said, "What's the Department of Military Instruction?" I said, "It's like the ROTC department."
Yeah, yeah.
So I did that for 3 years.
So, so after that, where did you go?
Then I went to some training schools for myself that they sent you to, just natural things, and then off to Korea for a year, and then back to the United States, where I ended up commanding my own company. And it was interesting. I never felt like I had to stay in the Army.
Right, right.
And kind of the deal I made myself was, as long as I looked at myself in the mirror and I liked who I saw, and I thought what I was doing was making a difference, then I could stay,
could
And if
stay.
I didn't think those things, then I should leave.
Yeah.
And so I ended up commanding a unit, and then this was an S3 of a battalion, was the operations officer, and then the executive officer. And then they sent me off to be a assignment officer, assign other officers in Washington.
Right. So you never felt pressured like this is where I have to be and I have no other options?
No.
Wonderful. So from that point, because you had mentioned you've done several services over in Europe and et cetera, how did that all develop? Do they have another college for generals, or I
Well,
don't know?
you go to school. In fact, a lot of people don't realize it, but in the military, you spend probably at least a quarter of your career, if not more, in school, learning to do different things and
Right.
different things. So,
Right.
after I'd gone to the intermediate school at Fort Leavenworth, I came out to Fort Lewis, and I was assigned.
So you're back here then?
For 4 years in the 9th Infantry Division, and which was a great assignment. I did all the jobs you were, supposed to do as an officer at that level. And I went back to, where did I go after that? Oh, I went off to command a battalion in Germany.
So this is your first time overseas?
No, I was in Korea earlier.
Oh, you were?
Yes, Korea right after my first set of schools. So
Interesting.
West Point School, Korea. Then back to command. Then up to being an assignments officer and work in the DA's Department of Army selection boards, where you choose people's schooling and for promotion. And then I went to Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth for school, Fort Lewis for a series of jobs that were appropriate. Then I became a battalion commander in Germany.
Wow.
And that was great. That was
So back to Korea, was there any highlights in Korea that you look at back going, that's pretty exciting? Or was it just marking time as it went?
no. I mean, I was stationed in Seoul, and I was stationed while Korea was in martial law, so it was always interesting. You know, you couldn't be on the streets after a certain point, and they were walking around with guns. You know, now they wouldn't shoot at an American soldier, but
Right.
they'd lock you up.
Just to talk.
Yeah. So anyway, no, I mean, I had a great job there in the movements arena, which served me well many times later in my career. So it was, it was a good assignment.
That's great. And then you came back here and then you went to Germany.
Yeah. After
Did they help you drink beer over there?
I already knew how to do that.
Germans know how to drink.
They do know how to drink beer and good wine. They do
And
drink
good
good
wine.
wine too. So, and some schnapps. They'd like to throw that stuff back.
Okay.
But Germany, I had truck battalion. Those trucks went all over Europe, so 18-wheelers, big ones. That was a great assignment. And then I left Germany and came back to another school, the War College.
So this is your third schooling, if not more.
Fourth, yeah.
Fourth. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And from there, I went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and commanded a brigade, which was, so a battalion had about 900 in it, and my brigade had about 3,500 people in it. So, and I was jumped out of perfectly good airplanes. I was an airborne unit, so
That's exciting to say the least.
that was a lot of high adventure.
High adventure.
Yeah. And
Did you ever get injured while you were landing, or you're all good?
No.
Oh, good.
Not.
Good.
I did in jump school when I was learning how to do it.
Right.
Back when I was a very junior captain, but while I was a colonel jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, no. And I jumped quite a bit, and had a good couple of years there doing that, and then I went from there back to Europe, to U.S. European Command, to a joint assignment, and that's where I got promoted to Brigadier General.
Really?
Yeah.
So, when you got promoted to Brigadier General, was there like a major responsibility difference or major area difference? Because I wasn't in the military, I don't know the difference.
Yeah, it does change. Does change a number of things. So, my first job was to go to Croatia as part of S4, which was in response to the Bosnian, Serbian, all that when Bosnia blew up, and Sarajevo, all that good stuff. So,
What year was that? Do you know?
yeah, that was 90. That started, I think, initially probably in 96 and 97. By the time the U.S. got into it, it was like 98, somewhere in there.
Right about there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Originally, it wasn't a U.S. involved thing, but
Right.
President Clinton decided when when the Serbs began to bomb Dubrovnik, this idyllic town that's a great World Heritage Site.
Okay, I haven't been there, so go
Well,
ahead.
it's renowned, and it sits above the Adriatic, and it's a walled city. It has no strategic purpose. It's just beautiful,
Just
beautiful
beautiful.
old medieval city. And when the Serbs began to shoot shells at it from on the hill above for no reason, that's when the U.S. finally intervened, because they were clearly they were just doing it, to be kind of like some of the stuff that Putin's doing, only Putin's doing it with bigger munitions. But that's when the U.S. and NATO came in force and said, "Oh no, that's
No.
enough."
So, because I'm not educated on this subject, do you think that it was good that we went?
Yes.
Okay, all right, okay.
And initially, the president said we're going to be there for a year, the U.S. Interestingly, at that point, Russia came into that also to help as a police. It was a worldwide police action. And Russia came in, but would refused to deal with anybody but the United States. So they wanted to be next to us in the areas where different countries were patrolling it and be responsible for. Russia only wanted to be borders with the U.S., didn't want to have borders with anybody else. It was kind of interesting. It was a very interesting sort of...
Do you know why they did that?
Well, that was in the blush of détente, before we had a resurgence of Russian nationalism and all this other stuff. So Yeltsin was actually very pro-democracy. Certainly Gorbachev was moving, and then Yeltsin, and then you end up with, eventually you get to Putin, but not until the 2000 something. So
Okay.
that time there was a real push, to open avenues constructively of discussion, and it wasn't a threat.
It wasn't a threat. Interesting. I'm so happy you're sharing this, because my world over here was totally different. So mentally, you're in the real game of the world, what's going on. So how many years were you involved with that whole situation there?
So because I was at U.S. European Command, we were involved, and then I was actually part of S4 for 6.5 months. So.
Okay. So 6.5 months you were there, and then where did you go from there?
I came back to the United States and took command of the DLA's distribution centers, they're basically the guys who distribute stuff for the United States military.
And that's a huge job.
Yeah, it's worldwide, and they got everything in those.
Everything.
Everything but ammunition. We didn't do ammunition. Everything else.
Everything else. Well, I was reading, or actually on YouTube, about Civil War, and they were talking about how much meat was given to each person per day. But I'm thinking that it's so much now, because we have trucks and airplanes and everything. It must be a huge amount of supplies.
So in the history of U.S. involvement in any kind of, so I don't know the famous, in the Spanish-American War, where they swam the horses.
No, I don't know anything, so
Okay,
go ahead,
so,
tell me.
Our problem is we've always had a lot of things. We've never had enough. We have never had the ability to move it all to where we needed it to be at the right time. That's always been the biggest challenge. So they swam horses, threw them off the ships and those kinds of things to get them to Cuba. When we went to war in World War I, the French said we need manpower. because the big problem for the United States is we didn't have enough ships to get all of our equipment and our people. So the French said, send people, we'll equip them with their artillery. And that's where we got the French 70. The French 75s were a big part of the American artillery in World War I because we didn't have ships to bring our own.
Oh, okay.
This kind of this
Catch-22
thing. In World War II, once again, I mean, we were the industrial might of a nation, and Roosevelt saw the war was coming and started actually building ships early, like
Oh,
in
he did?
38. He started getting busy building basically cargo ships, the kind of things that could move supplies, etc. But I mean, that's always been the experience, and the challenge for a military, especially a big one, is, and it's manifesting itself in Ukraine today, is if you don't have a strong line of supply, then you can't continue to move and fight. And so there's a lot of tenets to that that Alexander the Great understood, Napoleon understood, all those, the great generals always understood that. And so that's what the Department of Defense has, the DLA. Over years, they learned that they needed to be more efficient in how they did that. And after the war in Iraq, once again, they learned we didn't have the troop ships, we didn't have the equipment ships, rather, to move things rapidly. So there's only so much you can put on an airplane. So once again, a whole look at how quickly you can move things and deploy. So, so that's where I was there for 2 years, and then I was on the Army staff for a year. And then I went down to what's called at that time, Military Traffic Management Command, but now the Strategic Deployment and Distribution Command. And our job, as it turned out, when after 9/11, was to, once the U.S. had decided what we were going to do. First of all, after 9/11 was to stabilize things, and we did all of that. But once we decided we were going into Iraq, our job there was to figure out how to get us there. That was my job, was figuring out how to get the shipping power that, to orchestrate the stuff to do it. And at one point in time, we joked that you could probably, with a good run, hop, skip, and jump all the way to Europe across the ships that the United States was sending. Because we were sending a number of smaller ships because we were going into Turkish ports that couldn't support big ships for offloading equipment. So, and that was really my last job in the military, and I was a pretty tired puppy by the time.
So tired, what do you mean in the terms of just so much stress and so much demand? And
Well, when we were doing that, I was probably working close to 18 hours days. And
consistently. So this probably went on for years then?
a couple of years.
Couple of years.
Yeah.
Couple of years. So then you decide to retire. So from the point that you decide to retire to actually getting out of the military, was that a short period or long period? Or because I'm sure there was a big void that had to be filled.
No, I mean, the military is always training your successors.
Oh, they are? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so I gave them notification and about, said this is my timeline, and so that worked.
That
was
worked.
about 6 months, and then I walked out the door and started working for a company in the private sector that was in the rail arena. Railroads.
Oh, railroads. I was thinking rail
Distribution.
guns.
No.
Okay.
Railroads. Rail distribution.
That's interesting. So are you currently working now, or are you retired? You're retired.
Retired.
So your whole span from nothing to becoming a brigadier general, how long was that?
See, I think I became a brigadier in 97.
Okay, 97.
So, and I joined the Army in 73, so.
So 25 years. That's really interesting. So obviously you went a totally different path than when you started out from. So looking back, it sounds like to me that you're quite happy with your decisions. That's
Yep.
wonderful. That's wonderful. So you have a beautiful home here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm very familiar with this street. I think you have one of the most lovely properties. And you said you have a place back in Virginia?
Yes.
So do you like to, is that kind of like a home base over there, or this your home base, or?
Well, this is the home base now.
Oh, wonderful.
And the pandemic certainly solidified that.
Well, you know, it's a lovely, lovely, lovely home, and I look forward to coming back. I'm going to do your windows in a few months, I think. So thank you, Barbara, and I appreciate your time very, very much.
Okay.